All right, Darrell Price, welcome to the garage.
What's up, buddy? I'm glad to be here.
Good, thanks for being here, man. How are you?
Doing well. It's been a hectic season, just life, but I
What
think
season of life are you in?
right now, as you know, and I'm sure we'll chat about it a little bit, but I work for a church, and we're in the middle of December, so we're all like Christmas parties and
Busy season for churches.
Christmas parties and Christmas Eve services, and not only that, but being portable church, all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff is just like, okay, where are we having our services? What time are we having our services? Do we have enough teams ready to go? All that good stuff. So it's just lots of planning on top of that. Hey, how do we visit my family and my wife's family and all that kind of stuff?
There's a lot. So before I go too far down that road, and like the audience that is watching will be a small one, but for the people that are watching, tell me a little bit about yourself. How old are you?
I'm 30. I just turned 30 last month.
Okay, congratulations.
Yeah, man.
Maybe.
Made it a whole 30 years.
1 foot in the grave.
My back immediately started hurting, and I'm not kidding. I've
Actually.
had back pain for the past 3 weeks now.
Because you turned 30.
I don't think it's that. I think it's a coincidence.
I think it's because you turned 30.
We'll see.
What's going on with your back?
I think I either did it playing disc golf or playing pickleball.
Yeah, you are getting
but
old.
just like my lower back here, it's just like anytime I play pickleball for longer than 20 minutes and walk on it funny or something like that, it's just like, oh gosh, that didn't used to feel that way.
Dude, I turned 31 in May, and when you're 20, you think 30 is so old, and you think like those people are just like dinosaurs, but then you turn 30 and you realize you're the exact same person. Nothing's changed except your body does start getting old. Like my sight's going.
100%, man.
I'm pretty much dead.
Well, and I've actually been thinking about this a lot recently. I don't know if it's because of turning 30 and all that kind of stuff, but I have been thinking about, man, the people that I used to be like, oh man, like that person's like lame or they're old or whatever. I'm like, that person was 34. Like,
you get it.
I'm like, I'm basically that person now.
What time do you go to bed?
I am one of the ones that goes to bed pretty late.
You're a night owl.
Erin will go to bed anywhere between 9 and 10 sometimes. Sometimes she'll be up a little later than
Which
that.
is about in line with what I do. So what time are you?
I'm normally 12 is when I'm like, okay, I should really start thinking about going to bed. And
Okay.
I'm normally in bed by 12:30.
So in bed by 12:30, sleep by 1 a.m. Man, that's
I think I'm just holding on to the youth. I'm like, no, when I was young, I stayed up late. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna stay up late now.
What are you doing into the wee hours of the night?
Depends. I'm trying to hold on to the youth. So I'll play video games with a couple guys online. I've got a good buddy that lives in Yorktown, so I don't get to see him that much.
Is he one of the ones you game with?
Yeah, so that's a good way for us to kind of stay connected.
For sure.
And we'll just chat while we're playing some games or whatever.
I
might just watch a movie. I might read a book.
Whatever it may be.
Sometimes I'll fall asleep in my office chair and wake up and be like, oh gosh, it's 2 a.m.
Yeah, that sounds like sounds a little bit like Brandon. Apparently, he falls asleep on the couch a lot, and I don't know if I can't fall asleep in uncomfortable positions, but it's a superpower. That's
Yeah.
good. So just turned 30, married. How long have you guys been together?
It will be 2 years. Well, together. Let's see. She's gonna kill me if she hears this, and I don't know.
Love it.
We started dating officially in October of 2019.
October of 19. Okay.
Just over 4 years.
So there's so many different ranges of how people do it. There's obviously no right or wrong answer. Some people date for 10 years and then get married. Some will get married after a year.
Yeah.
That's not terribly too long together.
Yeah, it's only been 4 years.
You got married after 2?
Almost 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years next month.
Okay, yeah.
So we dated for about 2 years. We've been married almost 2 years. I try not to be judgmental of anybody's dating or marriage situation. I know people that dated for 3 weeks, got engaged for 2 months, and then got married. I know people that dated for 8 years before they got engaged, and then were engaged for another year and a half, and then got married.
No right or wrong way of doing it.
Yeah, it's really all when you feel the timing out. It's really like, okay, I feel really comfortable with this person. I feel like it's time for us to take kind of the next steps. And
so this is coming more from a personal stance, pure curiosity, because I'm single, would love to find the right one, but finding the right one is not quite as easy as they make it look in the movies. And how did you know she was the right one?
Again, she's gonna kill me if she hears this and I don't give the correct answer. But I'll be honest, man. I had a conversation with another buddy of mine recently. He was asking about all kinds of dating stuff. He was like, "Hey, I have this situation going on with a female in my life, and we're trying to figure out, are we dating? Are we not dating? Should we be dating? Whatever." And I kind of gave him some unsolicited advice, but he also was like, "Man, I just want to know your thoughts on this more than anything." And I told him, I was like, "Man, there's kind of no right answer to that either. There's no answer that's like, at least for me, I don't believe that there's a light switch that flips on that's like, this is the person."
Okay.
I'm a big believer that it's like love is a choice, and you can be with someone and choose to love them and say, "Man, I love you so much because I've chosen to love you over and over again that I want to spend the rest of my life with you."
Interesting.
I don't think, I know for me and Aaron, there was never a moment for me where I was like, wow, this is 100% like the person that God like designed for me.
Yeah.
Having said that, that's a tricky way to say that,
Yeah,
because having said that, she has become the person that I know that God designed for me.
Good answer.
And through us like working out some issues in dating, working out some issues through engagement, we're still working out issues in marriage, and we're going to be for the rest of our marriage.
Sure. Yeah.
But because of that, it becomes easier when it's like, okay, I'm going to commit to this person. This is the person that I know that I want to spend the rest of my life with. And again, it's just a choice. Love is a choice. You wake up every day and like choose to have to love that person.
Well, which is interesting. I made a joke earlier about how like the movies make it look a certain way, and there's like this epiphany light bulb moment, and so maybe
I don't buy that, man.
right. Well, and so here's the thing is like, so some people believe in the one. I don't believe in the one.
Yeah.
I don't think, as I don't think God has crafted a human being and it's like, where's Waldo, and that's the one human being for you. I think that you do have to kind of like find a good compatible person and then make the decision.
I 100% agree with that. I mean, I dated a decent amount before I got married to Erin, so much so that in our couples small group, she, I think like a month into the small group, told everyone that I was like a serial dater.
Really?
Those were her words, and I still am upset about them to this day.
You're holding on to that.
She called me a serial dater.
A serial dater.
But I dated some other people that were awesome. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of compatibility. We had a lot of chemistry. And could I have been with one of those other people for the rest of my life? Yeah, probably. I could have spent the rest of my life choosing to love that other person. But I was not in a season where I was ready to do that. God did not have me in a season to do that yet.
Yeah.
And God didn't have that for the other person either. Just the timing lined up of like, Aaron and I were both learning how to choose to love somebody at the same time. And because of us, like, being the timing working out and being like, this is the person I'm with right now. Great. Like, I'm going to choose to love you every day because I'm going to marry you. And I'm not going to, let that go. I'm not going to let the love die just because, like, we got in a fight last night, and so now I'm upset and you weren't the right person to marry. It's like, no, like, this is what marriage is. It's a commitment. It's a lifelong commitment.
Well, and so you bring up an interesting point, but I mean, you have to be ready, and you have to be in that season of life, and like a lot of people aren't ready. I mean, and to bring God into it, and kind of like what you said, he can see what we are and are not ready for, regardless of what we want. And so but we have to get ready and be like emotionally mature and financially mature. And I guess you don't have to do those things to get married, but sometimes I think you're just not ready for it, you know? And timing does. So love isn't everything. I think timing is important too,
100%.
Interesting. How did you two meet?
We met at Hill City. Hill City Church.
Yeah.
So I moved up to Richmond to be on staff at Hill City.
From where? Where'd you move from?
I was in Norfolk for about 6 years.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, man, Norfolk was great.
Really?
I think about it all the time.
Okay.
I've grown to love Richmond, but I was pretty hesitant to leave Norfolk at first.
My grandmother was from there, and I mean, I only saw it from that one narrow point of view. Sure. I don't know, but so not a bad place to live.
Yeah. It's so funny, and I won't harp on this too long, but it's so funny because part of my whole journey and even like getting to Richmond was like learning. I feel like I learned how to hear God's voice when I was living in Norfolk.
Interesting.
There was a season of my life where I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be doing with my life next. I wasn't sure like where I was supposed to go. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be doing. I felt a calling into ministry. I wanted to get a job at the church that I was working for, the church that I was attending. They ended up hiring somebody else into the role.
No kidding.
And I was like, God, why? Like, why am I?
I'm ready.
I was like, why are you not presenting opportunities to me? Like, I want to do this for you. I want to work in ministry. I want to like build the kingdom.
And I'm trying to serve you. Right. Why are you taking this? Yeah. And keep going.
So, but in that season, somebody spoke to me, and I was just like, man, I'm just having a really hard time hearing God's voice. And the person I was talking to, he was like, when I am having trouble hearing God's voice, I always go back to whatever the last thing I felt like I heard him say was.
This is why we keep a journal.
For sure. And he was like, then I asked myself two questions. Like, have I done that thing? And then it's kind of like a fork in the road. It's like, if I have done that thing, then I need to keep doing it because God's still waiting for me to like continue in that process.
Yeah.
If I haven't done that thing yet, then I need to go back and make sure that I've done what I know that God said first. And I knew for me in that season that God had told me I was supposed to be in Norfolk. Even when I felt like, gosh, I feel like there's opportunities somewhere else. I don't really want to be here. I'm not loving Norfolk, but I knew that that's where I was supposed to be. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to be here. I'm just going to be in community. I'm going to serve however I can. I'm going to like the worship director that this church just hired. I'm going to do whatever I can to assist them while I'm waiting, while I'm figuring out whatever the next move is.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, fast forward a couple of years, I ended up getting that job at that church after the other worship pastor left. And right as I was feeling like, man, I love Norfolk. I feel like I'm so happy that God kept me here. That's when God was like, hey, it's time to go to Richmond. I was like,
how did that message come to you?
It's tough. I felt it, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I understand.
I had a connection in Richmond, like basically say, hey, I've got somebody that is looking for a worship director. They might be interested in you if you're looking to move to Richmond.
So it did come in the form of an opportunity.
Came in the form of an opportunity for sure. But I'll tell you, that opportunity came, and
the timing wasn't. It was not what you wanted.
For about 3 months, I was like, no, I think I'm good. And he asked like 2 or 3 more times in that period. He was like, you sure? Like, they're really looking for somebody. And I was like, no, I think I'm good. I'm finally happy.
I'm happy
in Norfolk.
where I am.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I love what I'm doing. And then kind of pretty suddenly, honestly, I just was like, oh, shoot, that's where I'm supposed to be.
It just something switched.
And it was not something I wanted. I mean, I was in a relationship with somebody in Norfolk.
Yeah.
I had a whole life in Norfolk. I was like, God, why are you ripping me away from this when I'm like finally just settling in?
This is where I want to be.
Yeah. But even in the midst of that, like God gave me moments of peace that kind of said, okay, like this is good. Like the buddy that I was talking about that lives in Yorktown, that I play video games with sometimes, he was moving up to Richmond at the exact same time. So we actually ended up getting to live together for about almost 2 years.
So it kind of softens that blow a little bit.
It just was like, okay, I'm not super happy about this, but I'm having some peace about it at the same time. Like there's good things. Like God is showing me that, hey, just stay with me here a little bit because there's something good for you here.
Are you glad you did it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it has been a wild ride. That was very much in the formative years of my life. I was still figuring out I'm still figuring out a lot of stuff, but I just learned a lot through that experience of learning to listen to God. I saw a lot of the ways that like my life was messed up and just I was an irresponsible 25-year-old kid.
A lot of us are at 25.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like peace about being here. I felt like it was I met my wife being here.
Yeah. But if you hadn't taken that step, if you hadn't been the worship director at a new church, maybe you would never have met the wife. And it's probably a good thing you took that leap. I feel like there's something that it's tough to discern what he wants versus what we think he wants. Like, is that a message you're giving me? Do you really want me to do that? And you got to a point where you felt and you knew what the right answer was, but it's tough to discern that. And there's something that happened to me in the past, recently, where I connected with an old friend, and in my opinion, it was very much a divine happening. and we reconnected after 15 years, and that friend is part of a church. And part of me felt like God was saying, Dane, this is a path I want you to take, and this is a path and this is the exact same time when I was really settling into NUCO. I was kind of forming my own small group. I was really meeting a community and friends that I really, really like, and I've never had that before in my life.
Yeah.
And then there's this tug over here that is like, does God want me to leave? I like where I am. I don't want to leave where I am. I'm happy, and this is good. And is he really calling me to leave all of that to go pursue? And I don't know. And I've said no to this, and I don't know if I should have. You get what I'm saying? And it sounds very similar, but you found a peace, and you knew what the answer was.
Yeah. And that question you asked, like, is he really asking me to leave this? Like, I feel like that's the question at the core of it. Is it like, okay, God, like, I think that's the human nature. We've talked about that in small groups before. Like, just like that human nature piece of like, are you sure, God? Like, I mean, we could look at that two ways. We could look at that as like the enemy saying, kind of whispering to us and be like, I mean, like the snake in the garden to Adam and Eve. Did God really say that? We could look at it that way.
Yeah.
Or we could say, man, that part of that's just human nature. Just like, man, I just have a longing for what's comfortable. I have a longing for
and
what I'm used to. And
should I leave these things behind and go into this uncomfortable territory? And I don't know what's the answer. I know sometimes you have to take that leap of faith.
Yeah.
Man, I guess I need to have some praying to do, don't I?
No, I mean, I think the topic of discernment is, it's complicated. It's not cut and dry. It's not, this is when God is speaking, this is not when God is not speaking. It's like,
he doesn't give us that roadmap. He gives us a freaking compass, and we have to trust what's around the corner. Have you ever heard of a book called Whisper? Mark Batterman.
I know Mark Batterson, but
Batterson, thank you.
I don't think I've heard that book.
Okay. Well, it was one that actually a friend from NUCO recommended to me, and I'm like 1/3 of the way through it. And
Sweet.
it's about hearing the voice of God, and it's really good. And how did you find to learn? You had mentioned that you learned to hear the voice of God in Norfolk, and was it just through that particular experience?
It was.
Can you help me hear the voice of God?
Yeah, I mean that was well, here's how you hear the voice of God. No.
Step
man,
one.
I wish. I think I would be a super wealthy minister if I could teach all Christians how to hear the voice of God.
Yeah, I heard that.
It's a process for sure. I mean, and I think for me, I was intentionally in a discipleship group that one of the books that we read basically taught some kind of practical measures for hearing the voice of God, and it used scripture to basically show that there's basically a passage in the Bible where they talk about like the time has come, and it's talking about Jesus is arriving. John the Baptist is saying the kingdom of heaven is here.
Okay.
And using that Greek word that they used the word chronos to describe linear time, to describe chronological time. That's where we get chronology.
Yeah.
There's another word for time called kairos. And kairos is basically a moment in time. And so we processed how to read certain moments. Like when you kind of just perceive, okay, this seems important, or this conversation I'm having, or this moment, like how is God speaking into this very moment right now? Like we could look at this as a kairos moment. Like, what is God trying to say to us by being here right now? And
it takes a mindset to even start that. I think and I'm phrasing this as a statement, but it's more of a question. But like, I mean, you have to like consciously be aware of each and every single moment of like, hey, is he speaking in this moment?
Yeah.
Is that a fair statement?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think so for sure. Not to get super over spiritual with it, but like, I think the reality is God's always speaking.
Right. Yeah, okay.
Especially if it's like, okay, if we're considering, the Bible, the God-breathed word the word of God,
mm-hmm.
then there's always something in there for us to glean about whatever situation we're going through, or something that we're trying to figure out or process through. There's always all kinds of stuff. But I think God's always speaking to us. I think sometimes it's more of a, hey, I love you. Hey, you're my child.
Here's-
Hey, don't forget who you are.
Right. Peace,
And then-
maybe peace in the current moment.
Yes. And then other times it's, hey, this is what I'm asking you to do. Hey, go pray for that person.
Or
Hey,
here's
call
a
this
thought
person.
that I'm
This
putting
person,
exactly. Yeah.
I'm putting this person on your heart and on your mind for a reason.
Yeah. And sometimes
Those are the kinds of things I feel like I've really tried to lean into a little bit more of just the recognition of when God is speaking, of saying, man, I have seen this same homeless person on the corner every day this week, and I used to not notice them, but I've noticed them every day this week. Why? What's different?
interesting.
And it might not be God saying, hey, you're supposed to give $100 to this homeless person, but it
Maybe
might
kindness.
be a subtle way of saying, like, hey, can you just pray for this person? Like, they need a prayer right now.
Yeah.
They
Interesting.
need, they're facing a lot of battles and a lot of demons right now. And sometimes it's just God's way of reshaping our thinking and our perception of the world.
And you have to be open to that sort of thing. And so what I've tried doing, and actually this morning I sat down and just gave a very deep, heartfelt prayer, and I asked him, like, let me hear from you today. I want and so the prayer went much deeper than that, but that was the premise of it. And so then, but what I then did was I went towards the day and went out and did this things. But I was open. I was trying to hear from him, whether it was through another person, I was just trying to be expectant is the word of it,
Yeah.
or word for it. And he's like answered that prayer. Like, we're halfway through the day, and it's
Yeah.
like, he's like, all right, Dane, well, here you go. You're
Yeah.
gonna, and like, it's crazy the conversations that I've had with people, and the way that some of these conversations have just really struck home with me.
Yeah.
But I think you have to be in that state of expectation. You have to be open
Yep.
to what he's saying.
That's 100% the key, is just being open to, being receptive to, okay,
Yes.
God, if you're speaking, like, let me
Help me to
know
be
that you're
aware.
speaking.
Yeah.
Yes, help me be aware that you're speaking. We, on the NUCO leadership team, we do a thing called P3, and it's just a form of praying where you could look at it one way and say, like, man, that's kind of feels manufactured. But you could look at it the other way and say, like, no, like, I think God wants to interact with us and wants to speak with us. And so what we do is basically our whole lead team will get together and just say, hey, we're just going to pray silently for a little bit. And if you feel like God is speaking a word to you that might be for the group, or something that you just can't shake, like if God is saying, if God's just giving you a
Something
word
pops on your mind or whatever. Yeah, I get it.
then say that out loud, and we're going to write it down, and we're going to come together at the end and kind of see what God has been speaking to each of us through this. And you would be
Interesting.
shocked at the amount of times that, like, by the end of it, we get a list of prayers that's just like, holy cow, I can see a through line through this. Like, this feels like God speaking.
Almost
to
like
our group in
it
this
gives
moment.
each person a different piece, but that piece forms a puzzle,
Yeah.
or
And that's just a
interesting.
practical, kind of tangible way to get better at hearing the voice of God. It's just like knowing that, okay, I'm with some other people. Like the Bible says, where two or more are gathered, there I am also. So when we're already together praying, like, we know God is there in the room with us. Or
now we
believe
just
that
have to
God's
be
there in the room with
receptive
us.
to what he's saying.
100%.
However he happens to be saying it. It's kind of cool, isn't it? It's almost like a superpower.
It's wild, man. I mean, the way that I feel like my relationship with God has changed in the past probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. I was a pretty, not jaded Christian, but I was very Pharisaical. Does that?
Something to do with Pharisees?
Yes, 100%. That's what it means. Is like I had a heart that was very much like, well, I believe this, and this in Scripture.
You were sort of set in your ways a little bit.
Yes, 100%. I grew up in the church. I grew up being like, this is right, this is wrong, very black and white.
Kind of like the Pharisees. Fascinating. I'm listening. Yeah.
And so that was my perception of Christianity for a long time. Like, I was like, if you don't look like this, if I see you not living your life in this way, you're not a Christian. And it's just changed so much to understand that, like, oh, there's always people in different stages of their faith journey. And recognizing that, like, God through the past 7-8 years has shown me, like, man, my heart sucks way worse than half of the people that I used to say, well, you're definitely not a Christian too.
Interesting. Kind of a gentle fatherly rebuke in
Yeah.
a way. Yeah. So there's a book by C.S. Lewis called Mere Christianity.
Yeah.
Have you read it?
Yeah.
It's really good.
Great, man.
Well, it's really good, but it's a little slow in parts. But that's me and my ADHD kicking in. But he explains it. So like, if you, let's say, under the assumption that you truly turn to God, you repent, you want to live your life following Jesus, and that's the standard. So you got a guy, and that's a true, honest desire on your heart, a person's heart. And you got a guy who's of this level. That's not going to bring everybody up to the same level of kindness. As an example, so you got somebody who's kind here at this level,
Yeah.
and then they do that following Jesus thing,
Yep.
and that'll take them that much higher because they already started. But then you got somebody who's had a horrible upbringing and has a horrible past childhood, and they're at this level of kindness, and
Yeah.
then they turn to Jesus. Then it might bring them up to here, and they both went up by 100%. But that doesn't mean everybody's going to look the exact same. And we all, and that's just an example, but kind of supporting what you're saying.
Yeah.
You know, it's fascinating.
Yeah. And talking about faith it obviously is part of my job I work in ministry, but I think too, it's one of my favorite things to talk about, like even with non-believers, just because I like understanding the moments that shape people's faith or non-faith
And so it sounds like you didn't necessarily have like a come to Jesus moments. I mean, you grew up in your church your whole life. Is that church on Sundays? And so you didn't have like one particular moment, did you?
No, man. I feel like,
which is fine. I mean, there's no right or wrong way of doing it. I'm sorry if I'm phrasing that in a way.
It honestly is one of the things that I feel like I've struggled with in my adult life in faith is kind of like, man, I get jealous of these people that are like, man, I was a ex-convict and, I
live in this life this particular way.
Sexual harassment charges and, drug charges and had 50 DUIs and all this kind of stuff. I did 10 years in prison, and somebody in prison ministry like saved my life, and I met Jesus, and it was this radical 180 turnaround because I'm like, man, I feel like I don't know. I feel like, the story of the prodigal son.
In the Bible?
Yeah.
Give me the dummy version.
Dummy version.
Speaking to a dummy.
There's a father with two sons. One son stays behind and lives with the father.
Okay.
One son asks for his inheritance early.
I've heard this. Keep going.
Yeah, and so he asks for his inheritance early, and then leaves his father.
Mm-hmm.
He
wastes it all.
Wastes it all, squanders it away. Eventually makes his way back to the father, and the father like embraces him with loving arms, like runs down the hill to him, and takes him back home. His son was like, I can't believe that you would still accept me, while the other brother is mad that the father accepted him because he was like, I was here the whole time, like I never asked for my inheritance, like why do you still love him so much?
Yeah.
And it's one of Jesus's parables when he's talking about God leaving the 99 for the one, basically.
Yeah, his love doesn't change for us, and we can stray and we can go off, but if we go back to him, nothing changes. I mean, arms wide open.
Yeah. But I bring that up to say that I feel like a lot of times my heart looks like the elder brother, the one that stayed behind, the one that was always with the father.
I see.
And
wow, that's
jealous
deep.
of like, God, why didn't you like have this big party for me? Why didn't you celebrate me? Because you're celebrating all these new believers, and it's like, but it's just always a good reminder that it's like, that's what it's about. It's about the new people coming. Like you were the older brother, you were always here. Like I always knew you were going to be with me, but I needed to save the others that weren't here yet.
Well, and so let me. That's actually really, I like that, and you've thought about that before. And let me just speak on that ever so slightly. And so, in my own way, you know a little bit about it, but like I struggled. I didn't follow Jesus until a year and a half ago, and like struggled deeply with alcohol and doing kind of like the younger brother, went off and did my own thing, and not the best lifestyle. And I did end up coming back to him. But now looking at you as the older brother, I kind of see, I mean, I'm not jealous in a bad way, but I see you as somebody who has a deep relationship with the Father. You've never left him, and you have an understanding of him that I'm only beginning to be able to understand because I'm just now getting to know him. But you've had all of this time with him, which I in a way, I'm kind of jealous of that, you know? And I think that, so you and your understanding of God and your relationship with God is on a such deeper level than where I'm at. And my strive, my desire is to get to be where you're at.
Sure.
And so maybe that helps a little bit.
Well, I think the cool part about that and the beauty in what you just said too is that like we're both missing the point if we're jealous of each other. Because like if I'm jealous of the way that God loves you and you're jealous of the way that God loves me, that's not the point. The fact is God loves both of us, and it's like
absolutely equally.
That's what's cool.
Yeah,
like,
is.
That's where our focus should be. But in our world and as believers and even the church divided amongst itself half the time, it's like, who does God love most and which denomination does God love most? And
that person's got a story that I don't, and this person's got a, and like we're
it's all
missing
comparison and it's all stupid. So let's just agree to stop being jealous of each other. How about that?
Deal. Man, that's good. Wow, I didn't expect for that to happen. Well, and it's cool because we have the exact same Father, and he loves us all the exact same, and like none of us, we shouldn't even think about the other person and their journey. Just focus on our relationship with him.
Yeah.
In a way. So a 30-year-old as a worship director for a new church.
Yeah.
And you not only in the new church, but you've done that in the past church as well. I mean, is that a lot of responsibility?
Yeah. I think I've had varying levels of responsibility. I think I've been on a staff of 7 or 8 people with a church of 500 that like we felt like, okay, we've got, all of our ministries managed and all that kind of stuff, and we've all kind of got our silos or our things that we carry, and we all kind of balance those things. I've been on a staff of like 15.
Twice the size of the one you were just talking about.
Of a church that's like, 1,200 people.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's a lot of hands and a huge volunteer presence and lots of leadership from those volunteers. And so a lot of the times it can feel like, okay, like I'm not carrying as much load. And then I've been on staff at NewCo where there's 4 of us on staff, still trying to figure out, hey, what does this church plant thing look like? I mean, we're over 3 years into it at this point, and Brandon and Hannah would tell you, like, there's still just so much that we don't know. Like, but I think at the same time, it's cool to see God's blessing in that. It's cool to see the ways that God is this sounds so stupid and cheesy now that I'm saying it out loud. God is our other staff member. Like, God is the person that's like, hey, like, I'll handle all the details. Like, you guys just be faithful to the things that you're called to.
Just be where you're at,
yeah.
and operate, and let me handle the stuff that you don't know.
I really wish I didn't say that out loud. That sounds so stupid.
You're such a
cheesy.
cheeseball. No, but I mean, it's true, and like he's member of staff on the church, but also member of staff in our lives too.
And that's nothing wrong with any of those 3 situations. Those are the 3 situations that I've been in. But there's nothing wrong with any of them. I feel like each of those situations has carried their tasks out, and that's kind of what I was saying before with like the whole like, oh, church against church and denomination against denomination and all that kind of stuff. But like, God has a task for each body and has a task for each community and each church to say like, hey, these are the people you're serving. Like, meet these people's needs. These are the people you're serving. Meet these people's needs. These people aren't supposed to meet these people's needs.
Right. And maybe they can't.
Right. And so, like, for us at New Community, I know our heart is for, serving. I mean, it's called New Community Church. Like, how do we foster a community? How do we foster a place where people can come into and say, like, okay, this is a place where I can belong? There's other churches that's not their priority. Their priority might be world missions. Their priority might be,
interesting.
Hey, how do we help parachurch ministries succeed and be fruitful? And how do can we have a community where we are giving tons of money to these organizations so that they can do the work of God abroad? There's other churches that are like very tight knit, and that's what they're all about. Is like, hey, we're the tight knit. Like, this is our thing. our church community and all that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
Nothing wrong with any of those necessarily. Nothing wrong inherently with any of those, as long as they're fulfilling the task that God has for them. And I know that the task for us has just been, how do we continue creating deep areas of community for people to come into that are welcoming, that are inviting, that are disarming. That's a word that we use sometimes, just because
people sometimes have barriers that need to be lowered.
And quite frankly, we tend to get a lot of people that either are unchurched, have never been to church, or haven't been to church for a long time, or have church hurt.
And it's amazing.
So it's like, how do we create an environment for those people to walk into, the unchurched, the people who haven't been for a long time, the people who have a lot of church hurt? How do we create an opportunity for them to say, okay, so there's something different about this church. There's something about this community that I'm like, I want to keep checking that out.
Well, and so that's very well put. And like, I'll use my parents as an example. Like, so I came to NUCO because there was a couple of guys in the workout class who went, and the rest is history. But my parents, they jumped around from church to church, hadn't found a home or church that felt like home, and they didn't go steadily. And now they see me at NUCO, they hear me talking about it and seeing what it's doing, and now they go regularly. And so what you're doing is you're giving, which is exactly the demographic that you've explained. They haven't been in a long time, and I didn't have a single church, didn't have anything until NUCO. So it's almost exactly what you just described, and like those people need exactly what NUCO is doing.
Yeah,
and it's actually really cool to kind of see it doing its purpose to the T. So I was going to ask if churches have, like, is there a standard? Like, do churches, if you're 3 years old, do churches expect to have a building by that point?
Oh, getting into the building question. Man, you already made me say things that will tick my wife off. Now you're making me say things Brandon will get ticked off at me for.
Give it to me.
Nah, I'm just kidding. I think that's all a situational, seasonal thing, too. I think that there are churches that don't plant until they have a building, or they have their own area, that even if it's rental or a lease or something like that. There are churches that never have a building. When I was growing up, kind of in high school and into college, there was a church that I was helping out with that was portable. They'd been portable for 10, 12 years in a middle school. Lord, I don't even want to imagine. But I helped them out sometimes, and they just did that, and that's just what church was. Yeah. It wasn't as extensive of a setup as we do at New Community. We do a full production. We live stream. We have
lights, cameras, action.
They just kind of brought a small PA system. They had like a guitar player and a keys player, and every once in a while a drummer. Sometimes I was the drummer randomly, but it was a small church, and that's just what they did for church. It wasn't, man, when we get enough funds to get a building, or man, when we get enough, et cetera, when we get enough people.
That's who they were.
It's just like, no, this is just what our church is. So I would say it's seasonal and situational. And I would say in the case of NUCO, again, I'm going to try not to get myself in trouble here. Working for the church, to be frank, like, I get frustrated sometimes with the complications that we have of being portable. I get frustrated because I'm like, man, like, this thing would be so much easier if we just had a building. It would be so much easier if I could just invite, people during the week that I need to have a meeting with into a building, rather than like, hey, let's go get lunch or get coffee or whatever it is. At the same time, I'm like firmly in belief, and I know for a fact that God has us where we are for a reason, and like God like loves us right where we are, and is like, hey, keep being faithful to this situation. And that gives me the tenacity to just be like, okay, I need to shrug off whatever frustrations I'm feeling, because this is where we are, and like God's still doing incredible things in the midst of it. It's not about a building. Like, church is not about having a building. It's not about where you meet. It's about the people. Like, the church is not, God didn't say, upon this rock I will build my church, meaning literally this is the foundation, this is the stone, the masonry that I'm going to build this building on. It was, no, this is the person I'm going to build this church on. And so the church is all about people. It's all about doing it with the right people. I'm a firm believer that God brought Brandon and Hannah into my life and me into their lives to be able to support each other in doing this. I'm also a firm believer, and I trust them, that they did their due diligence before launching NUCO to say, okay, this isn't going to be comfortable for however long or whatever, but this is what we're being called to. God's not saying, hey, do it once you find a building. He's saying, do it now.
Yeah, don't do it when you're ready. Do it when I'm ready.
Yeah.
So, well, and who knows how he is operating? Well, the only thing we know is that it's good and he's got a plan. But like maybe the right place isn't ready yet, and maybe and so we won't go too much deeper down that path. But I didn't know if there were out of respect for not revealing things that you don't want to or shouldn't. But yeah, I mean, all we can do is sometimes trust him and trust his plan, whether we understand it or not. What's the and I got one. I'll ask you one question, and then maybe I got a good way to start winding down. But what's the toughest part about what you do? I mean, and maybe you just spoke about it actually, but as a worship director, 30 years old, fairly recently married, I mean, what's the most difficult part about the things you encounter?
Oh man, yeah, I think that is a huge part of it. Is
Yeah.
the difficulty is having to set up and tear everything down.
Every single week.
Especially on my side of things. Like, I don't think you feel it. I mean, I know you do feel it, but I don't think people feel it as much in, like, the lobby experience or the hosting experience.
Hopefully they don't feel it at all. You know?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, that feels mostly like 99% of churches you would walk into in America of, like, okay, we're walking into a building.
Yeah, I agree with that.
There's somebody at the door that's greeting me. There might be people in the parking lot that are greeting me.
They don't really see what's going on behind the curtains.
But then when we get into the service side of things, into the auditorium, that's where, and again, our hope is that, hey, let's make this as seamless of a process so that nobody feels like, oh, we're doing church in a theater? Like, this is weird. And I think a lot of...
Well, Nuco and you do a good job at that. I mean...
Yeah, and I think we accomplish that almost every week.
Yeah.
To a pretty high level. And... Yeah, I mean, I really do. We talk about it all the time. Like, it's pretty incredible what we've been able to pull off.
Yeah.
And we just, again, it's one of those confirmations that this is a God thing.
He's
and it's a God thing that we're in this season. But I think my challenge comes from because I'm more on the technical side and more on the service side of things. We run into a lot of, like, tech issues or... oh no, something got broken because we were, setting it up and tearing it down, or oh no, this volunteer didn't know how to handle this thing, and so they, broke it, and we don't have a backup, and just all that kind of stuff. Where it's like, oh gosh, how do we pivot and make a plan to make this Sunday work? Or hey, do we have time to buy something that can replace whatever just got broken? Or hey, we're having an issue setting up something on the production side of things that, we're not going to be able to live stream today. Or,
yeah. I mean, tearing up, setting down every single week. So you're basically literally starting from scratch every single week. I mean, there's guaranteed something's going to go a little bit astray.
Yeah. But again, I'm shocked at how often it doesn't. I'm shocked at how often things go relatively smoothly. And my goal is, or my hope is, it doesn't have to feel smooth to me. It doesn't have to feel smooth to Tyler, or Brandon, or Hannah, or whatever.
Yeah.
We need to make sure it feels smooth for the one that's in the room.
Well, you're exactly right. And I think, whether there's hiccups in the morning, hiccups setting up, tearing down, whatever it may be, that's almost, like, call it almost inevitable. But what matters is making it happen despite that. And like, what is the end result? And I think each and every week, the end result is exactly what it's supposed to be. I think it is. It's a good environment for the one, and it's helped probably people beyond our ability to count. And so, making it happen despite the speed bumps,
Well, and one of the things that we kind of talk about sometimes, like between Brandon, Hannah, and I, and we just kind of recognize that, hey, once we are in a permanent location, those problems aren't automatically gone. It doesn't mean
I was thinking that too.
It does give you less chance for some of those things if you're not setting up and tearing things down and unplugging and plugging back in and all
wear
that
and tear of things. Yeah, all of it. Yeah.
But it doesn't mean all that stuff's going to be mitigated, and a building's going to come with its own problems and its own costs and its own upkeep and its own shoot. We have a leak in the roof this week. How do we get that taken care of?
Yeah, so maybe our wires are a little bit more intact, but our roof is now leaking. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
There's pros and cons to each. A building is not, the ultimate solve.
Yeah. But we have to just trust him and his plan.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Well, so if there was a group of people in this world who you were most suited to give advice to, who would that group of people be?
Goodness gracious.
Making you think.
Whew,
I know.
that's a tough one.
It may help you.
I think I'm my own biggest critic, and so in my mind, I'm like, man, I hope I don't have to give anybody advice.
You're too critical. I think you're good at giving advice.
I think there's not necessarily a group of people that I would say, like, this is the group of people that I am qualified to give advice to. I think one of my personal, if I take off my critical hat for just a second, I think one of my personal best qualities is being able to empathize with somebody, empathize with, like, their situation. I've had my own, different kinds of struggles in life and things like that, and just lessons I've had to learn. And maybe I don't know exactly what somebody's going through, but I can at least think back to, man, I know how I felt when I was in a similar situation, or when I was in a similar mood or a similar whatever. And that allows me to be a good just listening ear for people. So I don't know if there's any group that I'm like,
yeah, but
this
maybe
is
somebody,
the group I should talk to. But I think just like
somebody who's going through something.
Yeah, yeah. I just feel like I've been through a lot in life. Life has been tough. So, no, but I say that jokingly, but there's a lot of stuff that I'm like, I'm very grateful to God for where I am, because I feel like a lot of things that I've experienced in my life, a lot of people don't end up on the other side in such a positive place.
Interesting.
So I think, just being able to say, hey, there's hope on the other side of, negative situations that have happened to you, or that even that you've caused yourself. Like there's hope on the other side of those things.
I can't speak for how you feel and what's going on underneath of the surface, but there's never, ever been a time that I've seen you appear anything other than at peace and comfortable where you're at, in a good mood, cheerful to be around, just very level. Like, I've never seen you anything but those things. And so the way that you, and so like, and honestly, like when you're here for the small groups on Wednesdays, when you do give thoughts and when you speak, you're very wise in the things that you do say. And I think so, like, if somebody's going, you don't have to have gone through X amount of things to be able to empathize with somebody who's going through something. And I think that you are very well suited to listen to people and to offer them advice, whatever it may be. And so I don't know if there's like one group that you're best suited to give advice to, but I think you are just also kind of good at giving advice. So do with that what you will. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, man. I think too, just even as you were talking and as I finished up a minute ago, I was kind of like, maybe that's the answer. Is I ended with, I'm good at recognizing when people need to just have some hope, and I'm a testament to, like, hey, there's hope on the other side of
whatever
certain
you may be.
situations that you're going through. And so I think maybe that's the group, is just anybody who needs some hope. Like,
I love that.
Hey, I'm willing to listen, and if I can speak into your situation to provide a direction for you to look and say, that's a good reason to stay hopeful.
Yeah.
Then,
well, dude, if there's a group of people that need help, and that group of people is people who need hope, I mean, that's a good group to be helping.
Yeah, man.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, so I often like to depends on who sits across from me, but I like to wrap this up in a prayer. I'm happy to do it. Would you do the honors?
Sure, man. Yeah, I'm happy to.
Okay. All right.
Let's do it.
Take it away.
Sweet. Father God, we just come to you, and we thank you so much for, just this time to hang out. I know we're in a setting that is atypical, and that other people will be listening to and seeing this. But God, just time to spend time with Dane. I have seen the ways that you've worked in him over the past year and a half. And God, I'm just so grateful for him. I'm grateful that he's in my life. I'm grateful that he is in the body of New Community, God. And I'm just extra grateful that he is your son, God. I'm so thankful for the ways that you bless us daily. Thank you so much just for time to have good conversation and good time to hang out. Pray that people would be blessed if they hear this. And I pray that you just continue to walk with both Dane and I in all the things that we do. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen. And I think you said it really well, actually. Be bless those that may hear this. And we've talked about it before, and actually it's kind of like Nuco's motto, but we have absolutely no idea how this conversation is going to touch people.
Yeah.
And that's actually not our jobs, which thank God.
But
All we have to do is sit here and have this conversation, and it goes out onto the internet and helps one single person, and job done, you know?
Yeah, I think definitely thank God that it was not our job to
Can you
bless
imagine?
people with this, because like I think all I did was like bash my wife and bash my job and
it's funny, man. I'm a little intentional with the questions I ask. Of course, it's up to the person sitting across from me and how they're going to respond, but I sometimes poke and prod a little bit, but I mean, you answered very well, and I hope you don't have to sleep in the doghouse. I don't think you said anything.
Thankfully, this will be post-produced, so
Yeah,
she won't see it for a little bit anyway.
that's
so.
true. Cool.
No, I think you're great at this, man. You're great at just having conversations with people. I mean, I recognize that whenever we do small group together and all that kind of stuff. I actually, just so you know, I brag on you all the time to Brandon and Hannah.
Do you?
I'm just like, man, like Dane is crushing the small group thing. And it's a great testament to what God has done in your life. I don't know if you feel that all the time, but
I'd love to feel it more. Wouldn't we all?
He's working in you, man. Like seriously, he's working in and through you. It's cool to see, and yeah, I'm just glad.
There's no higher compliment.
Asked me to do this. So.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing it. And it's funny, man. Like sometimes it's good to hear those things, and because we are our own biggest critics, and I am no exception. And sometimes I don't feel like I'm doing that good, and I like to hear. I mean, thank you for saying that. And sometimes we don't know these things unless somebody says the words, and so I appreciate that.
Yeah. Very, very seriously, man. I've always been impressed whenever I can make it out to small group, which is way less frequently than I'd like to. But I'm always just impressed with the way that you, and I've even the few times I've been, like seeing how you've grown since the first couple weeks of doing it.
And I don't even see that growth, actually. So
well,
that's cool. That's something you see.
I mean, even just the way that you lead people in conversation, like one, you don't dominate the conversation, which I've been a part of a bunch of small groups throughout my life. And I've been a part where the leader is like dominant and just like they're the ones talking the whole time and they're kind of talking at people. And it's like, this isn't a small group anymore. This is like you trying to teach me something versus like us having dialogue and conversation about, whatever we're talking about. I've also been a part of small groups where the leader is kind of abdicate leadership and they just kind of like, oh, whatever happens, and, we're totally off topic, not even talking about anything wholesome or growth-wise, or we're kind of just talking about whatever.
Really off the tracks.
Yeah. And you do a great job of letting conversation be organic, but one, being mindful of everybody's time and not letting us go till, 10:30 at night or whatever. But two, keeping us on guardrails without saying like,
yanking you
we
back.
We have to talk about this specifically.
Yeah.
Like if the conversation goes out for a little bit, it's like, okay, cool. Like we're having fun and like this is part of the relationship building. Is just, Tyler making a stupid joke. Or also, I didn't get asked how many people I killed. So I was prepared for that question.
What was your guess?
For how many I've killed?
I want to know how many you think Tyler has killed, but now I really want to know how many you have killed too. Yeah.
I think both of those numbers are 0. if I had to guess.
So in my story post for Tyler on that one, I didn't give the option to 0. I gave the option.
Yeah, I saw. I was like, I'm pretty sure it's 0.
No, it's either 1, 3, or 1,002. And actually, it's funny. The people that voted, it was 50-50 between 3 and 1,002.
Nobody said 1.
Nobody said 1.
They were like, it's either 3 or a lot.
I'm trying. It's funny. Everything you've given me kind words, and I appreciate that. And if you had known me 2-3 years ago, everything that I am blessed enough, fortunate enough to be, or the person that I may or may not be turning into, is all by the grace of God. And the person that I was 3-4 years ago was extremely self-centered, self-serving, didn't really put out any good into the planet, and it is sort of a 180, but that has nothing to do with me. That just speaks onto how good He is and the power. Yeah, I'm trying, and we all have. I couldn't strum a chord on a guitar for the life of me, and you really don't want to hear me sing.
Hey, I couldn't sell a house, so.
Well, and so we have different gifts and different ways of helping people, and so thank you for your kind words.
Yeah, dude. Question for you.
Yeah.
And this doesn't have to be on the record or whatever, but I feel like I have not taken the opportunity to ask you many questions while I've been doing this, but do you ever, you brought it up earlier about like not being married or anything like that, do you ever get discouraged by any of that kind of stuff?
It's a good question, and it's not fair for me to sit here and dig into people and not let them dig back. And so, I mean, this can be fully on the record, but break that down. I mean, if I were to put it in layman's terms, because I'm not the sharpest tool in the sky, do you mean, do I get discouraged by not having a partner?
Yeah. Do you get, or is there anything about your life right now at 31 years old? It doesn't have to be a wife. It could be not making enough money. It could be not having the job you thought you'd have. It could be whatever. Is there anything about this season of life you're discouraged in?
Well, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I'd really love to have a partner. I'd really like to have somebody to do all of this with, and I fluctuate, and I'm trying to have the right mentality about that, where I've got everything that I need, and I've got God, and He's given me the things that He's blessed me with, and so I don't need anything, and He is more than enough. But do I want somebody to come home to, and to have conversations with, and to boost each other along the way? Yes, absolutely. Sure. And so, but also, so I'm trying to not worry about that, not focus on it. I'm trying to just sit back and operate on the day-to-day activities that He's given to me, and trust that if that's something He wants, then that's something that'll happen in His time and not mine. So no, I'm not at a place of discouragement because of that, although that is something that has been on my mind, sure. And it's also why I kind of wonder, phrase the question, how did you know Aaron was the one?
Yeah.
And there's so many different answers that I get to that.
Yeah, sure.
But no, other than the wants that I have, and those are going back to my wants are becoming what He wants, and I'm trying to let go of the things that I want. I don't have a whole lot of things that I'm very, very happy, blessed, and fortunate. There's nothing that's really discouraging me. Now, if you'd asked me that question 6 months ago, I would have told you I was in the tightest financial time of my life, and that really drew me closer to Him and made me rely on Him in a way I never had before. If you had asked me 2 or 3 years ago, I would have told you that I can't stop drinking alcohol, and it's really kind of, I don't see the point in going on to each next day. Actually, I wouldn't mind just ending up in heaven. Let's just kind of, what's the point? But then you fast forward to right now, and I love each day, and it's a blessing.
That's awesome.
So I'm in a far better place now than I ever have been before.
Cool.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, I felt like I asked it very pointed at first, and I was like, actually, I don't really. I mean, I certainly care about, if that's a desire of your heart is to be married and have a partner and all that kind of stuff. I certainly care. but in the grand scheme of things, I care more about like, hey, what are the things that you are aspiring to? What are the
Yeah.
things that like that could discourage you in this season that you're like, man,
That's a
I
good
wish I
question.
was here. Because I feel like there's definitely, I mean, I look at my life every day and there's stuff where I'm like, man, this is not what I thought life was going to look like at 30. Like, if you had asked me 10 years ago what I'm going to look like at 30, it wasn't where I am right now. It doesn't mean where I am right now is bad. It also doesn't mean where I thought I would be is better than this. There's a lot of stuff that I am really happy about, but I think there's certain things that I'm like, man, like, what would life be like if, fork in the road happens if I had gone down this way instead of going down this way?
Yeah.
So I'm always just curious about
Yeah. No, it's
how
actually
people
really
feel about life stages.
well. It's a good question, and not only is it making me think, but I'm sure it might go out into the internet and make one other person think too. But like, I wouldn't change a single thing about where I'm at, and I'm in a place of trusting him and trusting his plan. Now, if part of his plan is for me to find the most beautiful love of my life in the next like 6 to 12 months, if that's okay, then I'd be all for that.
Yeah.
But no, man, I'm good.
Yeah.
It's actually a really good question. All right, dude, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, dude.
Was it what you thought it would be?
Yeah, I didn't really have any expectations of what we would talk about or what we would chat about or what might come up.
Just take it as it comes.
Yeah, and I kind of was like, it's funny because I figured at some point we'd probably talk about Nuco in some capacity, and one of the things that that I was kind of like, man, if he asks about this, I probably should say like, let's move on to something else. It was talking about us having a building.
Really?
But the way that you phrased it, I was like, okay, I think I can say this and be honest. I'm also a big believer that like transparency and honesty, especially among Christians, is one of the things that we are not super great at, and two, the thing that we probably need the most often. Or things would be better if we were all a little bit more transparent and honest with each other. That's why I think small groups are so important, because hopefully it breaks down some of those walls of like, okay, I don't have to, be so, what's the word I'm looking
guarded
for?
Or
yeah,
put on.
Like I don't have to like be so choosy with my words. I can kind of just say what comes out of my heart and just like, man, I trust
not
these
get
guys.
Judged.
Yes, I can trust these guys. I'm not going to get judged, and I can just say whatever I feel like I need to say.
Well, and we need that, and like, but you can't necessarily do that in the lobby of Nuco. You know what I'm saying? And so, but like, we need a place where we can be ourselves with the right people who are going to put you right on that. You say the wrong things to the wrong people, then that wrong thing may get reinforced.
Right.
You say the wrong thing around the right people, and we'll keep you on track. So it's interesting.
And that's exactly what I'm saying. Is like, I was in my mind, I was like, man, if that comes up, I should probably just avoid it entirely, because I might say the wrong thing to potentially the internet, which is like all of the people
everywhere. All
right
of the
and
people.
Wrong. But you asked it in a way that I was like, it kind of brought my guard down about it, because I was like, this is just a question. It's not a, do you love this season? Do you hate this season? It's like, hey, what's difficult about it? And I was like,
and like, what's normal? And there is no normal. Keep going. I'm listening.
Yeah, just I think I was trying to be careful about, am I going to say something that might hurt New Community or Brandon and Hannah, or like hurt their hearts, or like, am I going to say something that's going to come across as like, Dorrall hates working for New Community, or like, Dorrall's really unhappy in his job, like. And there's zero of that. Mm-hmm. There's zero of...
And you didn't come across that way at all.
Good. I definitely was a little calculated with like, hey, how do I phrase this? Because I want to make sure, not that I'm leaving something out, but want to make sure that I'm conveying that it's a positive, not a negative.
The proper message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I definitely... That was one of the topics that kind of coming in, I was like, man, if that comes up, I should probably avoid. But I think it's good conversation. And like I said, I think it's good for people to be transparent about how they feel about things in the right way, in a healthy way.
That's a good way of putting it.
I think there's oversharing too, but I knew I wasn't gonna go there with it. But I just was kind of like, hey, how do I be transparent? Because even if there's one person that hears this thing, whether they're a new co-person or not, maybe there's something in their life that they're not super happy about, or that is causing them some difficulties. Or man, if this one,
you're not alone.
If this one work thing changed, my job would be so much easier or so much better. And my hope was that message would convey that, hey, one, probably everybody on the planet has something that they're like, hey, this is, my job's great, but like if this one thing changed, it might even be 5% better. Or my marriage is great, but if this one thing changed, it might be 5% better. So that was my hope in kind of just being honest and saying, hey, I love my job. This part of it is definitely difficult, but that's kind of life, and we're all doing that together.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, if we're striving for perfection, then we're going to be, striving for the impossible, and nothing will ever be perfect. And this is, I'm extremely curious by nature. So this question just comes from a place of sheer curiosity. But like, is asking about like, hey, why don't we have a building? Which is a different way of phrasing it than I did before. But is that why is a building a sensitive thing?
I think it's, and sensitive is a great word for that topic, because it's not positive or negative. It's just sensitive.
Touchy.
It's just just a topic that like might cause people to bristle or is easier to avoid. I think it's sensitive because depending on who is asking and depending on how it's being asked, it could be viewed as a negative that we don't have a building. And I don't believe that to be true. Brandon and Hannah definitely don't believe that to be true.
Either.
I would say most people at NewCo don't believe that to be true inherently. But I think that it has the connotation of like, let me put it to you this way. If you are buying, do you have any nieces or nephews?
A lot.
Okay. So if you're going to buy your nephew a like remote control truck for Christmas, and you got him the red one and he really wanted the blue one, then it's kind of like, okay, if he looks at it and he's like, man, I really wanted the blue one, you bought me the red one, or whatever I just said. So I got red, I wanted blue. If I complain about that and say, why don't I have X? Why don't I have the blue one? Or why don't I have the one that I wanted?
It shows you're not being grateful for what you do have.
And so for us with New Community, it's kind of like, why are we focused on that? Like, we need to focus on, the people that are here. Focus on what we've got. Focus on the fact that, like, God is with us in the midst of this. And so I'm not saying that it's not a one-to-one parallel for sure. And I'm not saying that everybody has that heart behind asking it that way. But I think the word you used, that's why it's a sensitive topic, because you don't always know the heart of the person that's asking that question.
And so it's, and in my mind, like, not having a building, that's not a negative thing by any means. Buildings don't just pop up out of nowhere. I mean, there's so much that goes into making something like that happen. It takes time. And so, like, the fact that a church doesn't have a building doesn't, in my mind, doesn't have any negative connotation whatsoever. But what you're saying is, by talking about it, it may bring, you never know how somebody's going to perceive something.
Yeah.
And so by talking about it, it could, if NewCo itself talks about it too much, it may be talking about, it may show an image or a perception that they're not appreciating what they do have. Is that accurate?
That's a good way of saying it. And I think, like, it's less about people not appreciating it, but more about recognizing the opportunity that we have while we're here.
Yeah.
It's basically saying, it's basically saying, like, hey, we want to focus more on the opportunity that is in front of us rather than thinking about the one that currently is not.
Well, and I get that, and it makes sense, but in my mind, it's like something, and like my mind operates a little bit funny, but, and I get, maybe sensitive is the right word for it, but I like these conversations, but in my mind, it's something to own. Like, we don't have a building, and yet look what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know?
I told Hannah this past Sunday night, like, there was somebody, I forget who it was, somebody like 2 months ago asked me, they were like, you work at that, or they asked where I was working, and I was like, oh, New Community Church. And they were like, is that theater church? And it's like, that's kind of cool. That's like kind of what we're like known for.
Kind of like
if we're known
feisty.
by anything, like that's kind of
Scrappy,
it. Like,
yeah.
It's kind of like, yeah, like we meet in a theater, and it's awesome.
And we're one of the best churches around, and yet we don't even yet have our own building. Imagine how dope we're going to be when we do have one.
Yeah, I really come back to church is about the people that you're with and like the gospel that's being preached,
Yeah.
and the theology and doctrine behind what's being preached and taught. It's not about the building. It's not about, you know, where you're located and
the four walls
what size you are and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think just, and I would say this too, I feel like it gets made out to be more taboo than it actually is, or more sensitive than it actually is to talk about. Because I feel like it's perfectly fine for anybody to ask questions or to ask Brandon and Hannah, like, hey, like, we'd love to know like what's going on with all of this kind of stuff. I think it gets tough because then you have to discern, going back to discernment, you have to use wisdom to discern, like, okay, how much do I share with this person that I don't necessarily know their intentions? And some people you do know their intentions or do know their heart behind it, but like if it's like, man, I don't necessarily know what this person's heart might be behind it, or are they asking because they're complaining about how long we've been without a building?
Yeah.
Are they asking because they're lazy and don't want to have to keep setting everything up? Are they asking, like, what's the actual reason they're asking? Or are they asking because they're ungrateful for the fact that we're still have a meeting place every week and we're not like wondering where our church is going to meet every week?
Well, and then do you lose that person? Do they stop coming to church because they don't? I mean, there's just so many unknowns wrapped around it. It's maybe better or easier to just not talk about it.
Yeah. And better or easier to not talk about it, but also just like,
or to not make it
just
a
not
focus.
making a big deal about
Yeah.
it. Like, we'll get a building when we get a building, but like right now we're still having church. So like,
Let's focus on what's important.
it's kind of like, and I'll use you as an example for this. Like, it's kind of like, okay, you're grateful for where you are in this season, but like you said, like it would be really nice to have a partner in the next, 9 to 12 months.
Yeah,
something
we've
like
got
that.
everything we need.
The church often treats single people like, or historically has often taught or treated single people as, hey, once you get married, then you can be a vital part of the kingdom, because then you'll be made whole, and then you and your partner can serve in ministry together. Like I know of churches that won't hire a pastor because they're not married yet.
Really?
Oh yeah. Like, because it shows like a life stage of like, okay, if you're married, you're usually a little more mature,
Maybe a little more settled down.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. So I know churches that won't hire people unless they're married. But we know that's not true. Like, you are a super vital member of New Community and of the production team.
And I don't have a wife.
As a small group leader, you're not married, and you don't need to be. Like, that's the point, is like, you as an individual are like just as vital to the kingdom of God as any married couple at New Community Church.
Well, and it makes me think about Paul's words, and I don't know if it's Romans or Acts or whatever book it may be in the Bible, but I mean, Paul's like and I'm going to butcher this, but he says, I sometimes I wish more of you were like me, and you didn't have the. I mean, I think the context was, I'm single, and I wish you, and he's got nothing but time to serve God, and he doesn't have these other, and there's nothing wrong with having these other responsibilities, and you can honor God by honoring your family and doing right by them. But so, I mean, I almost think that in a way, the single people are in a better position to serve God's will than the people with a backpack of responsibilities on.
Paul literally says, I forget where, but he literally says it's better for a man to not get married if he can withstand.
Yeah. Now, if you can't do X, Y, Z, if you can't be moral, then get married, and I
don't know how literally we're supposed to take that, but like,
he does say
that was something that he said.
Yeah.
So to use that example as, okay, it gets made out to be, I don't know, it kind of just makes it seem like you can't be as effective if you're single in ministry. Like, you can't be as effective to the kingdom of God. Likewise, I think the fear is that certain people have the viewpoint that you can't be as effective as a church until you have a building. And I think that's what we don't want to create, is a culture of people that believe we can't be just as effective as whatever massive established church down the street because we don't have a building.
Look at you bringing that full circle, and that was a really good way of putting it. And so, and you never know how somebody's going to perceive something, and so you don't want that perception, because obviously it's not true. But if they don't, that's really well put. Yeah. So, well, we can all, yeah, okay. Well, and we're exactly where we're supposed to be, whether we understand it or not.
Yeah, man.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate thing. Is it's all about, if we're talking about New Community Church, it's all about us running our race as a church how we're supposed to. Like what I said earlier about this staff can't serve that church's needs, and that staff can't serve this church's needs. Our church can't serve the needs of, massive giant church down the road. Massive giant church down the road can't serve New Community's needs.
Mm-mm.
Like, we need to focus on the people in front of us, and focus on the situation in front of us, and focus on, hey, what are our church's core values, and how do we live those values out and teach others to live those values out.
Well, and using your parable, your story of the older brother and the older son and the younger son. I mean, the idea, if we're looking at what this other person's doing and comparing ourselves to them, then we've missed the point. The only point is getting to know the Father, and serving His purpose.
Yeah, man.
Cool. All right. Can I use all of that for the podcast?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I might get fired, but yeah.
God will give you another door.
Y'all might be finding our place to call home without me. But
I think you've said things really, really well, and but that's in keeping with who you are. I had another gentleman sitting where you are yesterday, and so I think technically that'll be episode 7. I think yours and ours will be episode 8. But he wants to review that episode before it gets online. So yeah, anyways, all right. Well, let me stop these cameras.
Cool, man. Yes, sir. This is fun, man.
Hey, thanks for watching the video. If it spoke to you, or if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button. There's going to be new content coming each and every single week. If you have a friend or a family member, somebody in your life who you think may benefit from a video like this, share the channel with them. Maybe it'll help. If you're personally going through a tough time and you feel like you're alone, drop a comment below. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what you're going through. I'd love to hear more. God bless you, and see you next time.